Hello all, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Rebecca Garrett-Waters, I'm the Chief Exec of the UFI Charitable Trust. I'll just wait another minute or so to pick up any additional attendees. But essentially the key things you need to know are that there's a questions panel. So if you want to ask anything, please do pop your question in there and then everyone will be able to see it. And if it's a technical question, my colleague Faye, who's also on the webinar, will be able to help you. And if it's a question about the call, I will get to all of the questions at the end and answer them in the order that they came in. And if for some reason you think I've missed one out, feel free to ask it again, or you think I haven't answered it properly. But I will just, as I said, give it 1 minute and then I will get started. The reason we do it as a kind of broadcast is because we sometimes have up to 100 attendees, so it makes it quite difficult to interact with everyone individually. But at the moment, we only have 25 attendees on this broadcast, so if anyone does want to introduce yourself via the questions panel in response to Konstantina, then that would be great. Also, it will make sure I know that you're listening and that you can hear me. So we'll make a start on the presentation, and if as we go along, if anyone wants to pop a hello and anything about themselves in the questions panel, feel free to. We're always very keen on building the VocTech community, so anything that introduces people to each other is always great. So the agenda for today is that I'll talk a little bit about UFI and our vision and the things that we're trying to achieve, and then I'll come on to the specifics of the VocTech Seed Fund 2017, a bit of background as to why we're doing it and where it came from, and then a little bit about what the fund is and what you can expect from it. So, and then I'll talk about what we're looking for via this process, and then a bit about how to apply, where you can find help if you need it. So UFI, we like to think that we're changing how we think about learning. We talk about ourselves as a catalyst for change. We had a starting funding pot of £50 million. We use that to grant fund organisations for all sorts of different things, but the fundamental principle behind it is that we want to achieve more skills for more people more of the time. We focus on adult vocational skills, so increasing the skills for the workplace and empowering people to access and achieve the skills they need for work. That's everything from being in a job and gaining skills for that job, gaining skills to progress through work, or gaining skills as a route into employment, or skills that you can use for work. We recognise that with the fund, our core fund being the size it is, we could spend it all tomorrow and not have a long-term impact on the system. But what we want to do is catalyse change, so fund projects that we can see or that we hope will have a long-term impact on the UK. So we're an independent grant giver, which means that we have a lot of flexibility about our funding, and we're not distributing funds for any other organisation. We're focused on the development of digital technology in order to deliver adult vocational skills. So we firmly believe that the UK needs more and better workplace skills, and the fundamental principle behind everything we do is that we believe digital technology can unlock these. So as I said, more skills for more people, more of the time. We believe that digital tech can offer new ways of engaging with learning. It can offer new ways of monitoring and kind of new systems that underpin it. But also it can offer more flexibility in terms of how people access learning and more flexibility in terms of how people are accredited and how they can use those skills in the workplace. So As I said, we know we can't change everything, but we can catalyse change. So what we look for are projects that explore new ways of delivering skills, new ways of supporting learning, or projects that take established technology but apply it to either new industry sectors, new community groups, or use it in new ways. What are we working to achieve? We believe that the best way we can catalyse change and the best way we can influence people is through doing, demonstration by doing. So we want to demonstrate the art of the possible, what can be achieved. And that's not just the art of the possible in terms of novel technology, but the art of the possible in terms of applying existing technologies to large numbers of people and having a significant impact on your workforce. We want to create the VocTech market. So we want to make VocTech a thing. We recognise that vocational learning and adult skills are often the unloved bit of the education spectrum, and that kind of can translate through to digital tech as well. So we want to create a place where we can either de-risk investment in VocTech, or we can show why it is an attractive market for investors. But fundamentally, we want to change the way we learn. Just as you can access your football scores, or find out what your friends have been up to, or order a takeaway or a taxi using digital tech, skills should be at your fingertips as well. So VocTech Seed 2017. This is the third year that we have run this type of call. We didn't previously call it, we started off just calling it the VocTech Learn Fund, but that's a bit of a mouthful. So we renamed our funding processes to try and make it clear what the different things do. And VocTech Seed is up to £50,000 per grant for projects that are up to 12 months. And we're looking at innovative solutions or using innovative tech. So the key there for us is why is your idea different? What we want are projects that in the long term have the potential to change the system. With VocTech Seed, we're looking at a relatively early stage of development. And the key thing that we ask from applicants is to tell us about your idea and why it's different to solutions that already exist. I always describe it as the change the world question. So what's the potential for your idea? If everything succeeds as you hope it to, what would change as a result? How would your idea impact on the UK? Would it be through more people gaining skills? Would it be better learner outcomes or better routes to employment? What we look for in your application is for you to tell us clearly what your idea is, but also for you to tell us what the long-term aspiration or the long-term vision for what you're doing is, how you see it progressing. We're not going to hold you to that, nor do we expect anyone to change the world within 12 months and using £50,000. But what we do want to have from your application is a sense of what could be achieved. So it's similar to calls, as I said, that we ran in 2015 and 2016, but we want to, the key thing for us about this call is that it's a part of our work to create a pipeline of new approaches. So the projects would need to explain how it's going to make a difference, why you're applying for charitable funding, and what the purpose of your idea is. We want to see things that are genuinely novel in your overall approach. That can be the technology or the sector or the community of learners you're targeting. We look for a clear understanding of the vocational learning market and the needs of the learners or the employers, or the needs of the learners and the employers that you're referencing in your application. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve with your product? We want you to be able to describe how the learning is going to be delivered, as well as the technical advances. And we also look for plans to test and to build feedback loops into your projects. So the grant call, the application process is open between the 24th of April and the 25th of May this year. So we talk about a range of start points for projects. You could have an existing prototype, or you could have extensive sector knowledge and a very clear problem you're trying to solve. You could have an existing solution in another market. That could be, for instance, you could have something that's aimed at schools, and you're looking for funding to develop that into an adult-orientated project. It could be something that's in a different sector. So maybe pulling something out of manufacturing and looking at how it can be developed in land-based industries. Or you could be looking at transferring it from one community of learners to another. We also look at projects that are innovative technology that are looking to significantly advance an existing learning approach. So if you've got something that you've tested at a very small scale and you want to take it to a demonstrator phase, we are interested in that as well. So the next question is, of course, then where would it end up? So we would like to your at the end of the 12-month period for you to have a solution that's been tested with a number of users, that it can demonstrate the potential impact, and that you will have a plan for your route to market and scaling up, as well as a business model, a plan for sustainability. That doesn't necessarily mean a fully commercial model, because we fund all sorts of different organisations, but we do look for our projects to exit with a sustainability model that will allow them to succeed beyond the lifetime of the grant fund itself. So who can apply? Everyone. This is an open call. It's open to all industries, sectors and technologies. We are very specifically looking for vocational skills for the workplace, and we're asked often what we mean by vocational skills. What we mean is skills that can be specific to an industry or sector, functional skills like literacy and numeracy, but we don't fund projects that look at generic job-seeking skills. So CV writing or time management. We are focused on adult learners, which is for us is 16 plus, although we do recognise that there may be a kind of grey area around the 14 to 16 agenda, but in terms of our core target audience, it is 16 plus. We have a focus on the unloved, so those industries, sectors or communities that are often overlooked in terms of training provision, and we'd need you to, in many instances, we want you to explain why the sector or industry or community that you're talking about could be unloved. Now, unloved is a very broad term, and deliberately so, because we don't just mean disadvantaged communities, and we don't just mean disadvantaged sectors. In many ways, it's the bits that are overlooked by the mainstream system. So in many ways, things like most things that happen at a college level are unloved, because it's the least exciting part of the education sector as far as politicians are concerned. For us, it's clearly the most exciting part of the education sector. But that's why we use such a kind of vague term. The other thing we're interested in are people who've disengaged with formal education. In terms of the types of organisations who can apply, and I will come back to this, we're open to applications from every type of organisation. But if you are an individual, you'll need to show that you have plans in place to become a registered organisation. So what types of digital technology? The answer is it's very broad. Pretty much everything. We look at mechanisms for mass reach rather than specific devices, because our ultimate goal is scale. So I always describe scale as the golden thread that runs through everything we do. Ultimately, we want all of our projects to have the potential to increase the availability or the impact or the engagement with skills for a large number of people. So we cover everything: simulation, gamification, hardware, software, networks, all sorts of different things. But there are a few things we don't fund. We don't fund business as usual, so routine business development or routine product development. We do fund product development, but not routine product development. So we need to understand why you are applying for our funding, and we need to understand why this isn't something that you would be doing anyway. We don't fund content-only projects. Now, we do fund the production of content, but as part of a bigger project. We don't believe that standard digitisation of content is where we can best use our funding, because that is a very well established set of technologies. We don't fund projects in schools, and we don't fund research projects. We also don't fund projects that are aimed at beneficiaries outside the UK. So again, we recognise that a lot of what we fund is going to have impacts outside the UK, particularly in the digital world. However, in terms of our assessment and meeting our own charitable objects and obligations, we can only look at those beneficiaries based within the UK in terms of assessing the impact of your proposal. We don't fund basic digital skills, like using Office or getting online. There's an exception, a slight exception to this, which is that where there's a very specific industry need identified for a sector that can clearly show a route into employment or pathway to work as a result of the digital skills, it is something we consider, but it remains quite a grey area for us, and that's partly because we were originally a sister organisation to what was the Tinder Foundation and is now, I may get this wrong, the Good Things Foundation. I'm always caught out by that one. But anyway, their remit was basic digital skills and getting people online, and ours was using digital technology in order to gain work skills. We don't fund life skills, as I mentioned, CV building, time management, that sort of thing. And we don't fund standard content development, so just digitisation of existing content. But although that looks like a long list, actually we fund an awful lot of things. So there are only a few specific limitations on our funds. So we like to talk about demonstrating the art of the possible. So we want VocTech Seed projects to contribute to our pipeline of new ideas for using digital tech. And we ask that all of our projects support our overall mission by showcasing their own experience of digital tech and their own experience of being in projects with us. So we ask that our projects become active members of a vocational learning community, and partly that's through their own active networking, but also we try and encourage joint workshops or joint events, and we try to work with the projects that come through each grant call as a cohort. I'll come on to a little bit more of that later. What I did want to do is touch on a couple of projects that we have funded that will just give you an idea of the sorts of things that we're interested in. So Capo is a project that we funded through the first VocTech Seed call in 2015. And this is on-demand micro-learning for everyday care. The idea being that the learning is a SIP. So you can undertake a piece of micro-learning in the time it would take you to have your cup of tea. The idea being that it was a accessible learning for a group for an industry sector that doesn't get an awful lot of training and attention. We like this project because the team understood their sector very well, and they understood the need that they were addressing, and they had an excellent route to market. This project is Stardust Studios, which is not a seed project, but this was numeracy without numbers. So the idea was that this looked at teaching maths concepts without using numbers to those who struggled in traditional formal education. It's a runner game, and you can get it on the App Store. But what it has within it are maths challenges that are set up as game challenges, and this is a game that's been downloaded to date. Last time I checked, it was over 19,000 times. But interestingly for us, the individual math challenges have been played over 87,000 times. So it's a great project, and it's also a lovely looking game. This is the British Hospitality Association, which was an interesting project for us because it represented a project with an industry association as opposed to an individual company. And they were looking for a solution that they could provide to their SME members. And they So we funded a pilot that looked at, say, food handling, and the idea being that it simulates pressure in a kitchen, and you have to follow the steps in the right order, clearly. And it's an interesting game because you can set it as an SME, you could set it up with your staff as a cohort so they can compete with each other to achieve high scores. So there's a competitive element that you can introduce within your own company. So we're often asked what sort of organisation should apply, and we always say that it's particularly suitable for early stage businesses or smaller digital innovators or other organisations, including FE colleges and other learning providers that are looking to test new digital approaches on a small scale. So we like having cohorts of projects that are all different sorts of organisations, but the key thing we look for is passion in what you're doing and an understanding of what you're trying to do. Digital innovators currently working in other markets where you can see an opportunity to adapt your approach to vocational learning or to a new sector. And as I said earlier, EdTech businesses that are looking to kind of step sideways from either higher education or schools-based work and into the vocational and workplace skills. So what are the key things that a VocTech Seed project needs to have? So we look for a focus on vocational learning. We look for the projects to show an understanding of what vocational learning is and proposing a solution to a defined learning need. We look for plans to test with relevant users and use that feedback. We also look for ambition and with a vision for taking the project to market and a kind of, as I said, a long-term vision for how what you're doing will ultimately reach a large number of learners. And we want you to have some sort of plan for sustainability beyond UFI funding. Now, we will help you finesse that and refine it over the 12-month period, but we want you to have at least some sense of what you're planning on doing on the other side of the funding round. And most of all, we want you to be realistic and deliverable within the time frame. Now, we say up to 50,000 and up to 12 months. And what that means is exactly that. So if you think that your project will only really take 9 months to complete, don't try and stretch it over the 12 months. Give us a 9-month plan, and we're perfectly open to that. So we are a charity, which means we have a charitable status. And what that means is that all of our funding decisions have to create public benefit. And as part of that, we have to ask our applicants about why they are applying for charitable funding. And we need to be clear about what the project's going to do and also about the target audience. So that's particularly pertinent for those organisations that aren't charities. They have to show that project costs are no more than strictly necessary to deliver the project. And that's one of the rules we need to abide by because of charitable status. And we also look carefully at the balance of funding being provided by the applicant. So this is less applicable in VocTech Seed because one of the key drivers of VocTech Seed was the fact that we felt that this level of funding was for vocational technology was not necessarily available in the marketplace. And we anticipate almost all of the applications, and so far in our experience, it's been 100% coming from individual organisations, and often small ones that can't put that much funding into it. However, if a larger organisation is looking to apply for this fund, we look very carefully at what they are putting into it and why this project deserves to have charitable funding. And are they bringing something, is that larger partner bringing something to the project that means that this project wouldn't happen without this co-funding, i.e. without UFI funding plus the larger organisation. So I'll move on to how to apply. We have an online application process, which is 2-stage. You have to register on our website, which I'm guessing you've probably already done if you're on the webinar. You can complete your application online. You can save it in draft and revisit it. We have a review process and then a shortlisting panel, which is the gateway to stage 2. And those projects that have made it through that gateway are invited to stage 2. and there's an expert panel undertakes the assessment and review, and then the final funding decisions are always made by the UFI Board of Trustees for every call and for every project. So what to expect if you're successful? We are a partnership funder. We maintain an active dialogue with you throughout the project. So we allocate a project manager who is your key point of contact with UFI. And we like to operate on an agile model. The first step is a project implementation document, or PID, which will set out all the delivery arrangements and milestones. And we recognise that each project is unique. So we'll work with you to agree what's best and what's most reasonable. Now, in taking an agile approach, part of the rationale for that is knowing that things change. And the route to your end goal may need to adapt. Partly because it could be to do with user feedback, or it could be to do with challenges you face during the project. But that's something we expect, and we want you to be honest with us so we can help you get to the other end of your project with the absolute best chance of success. And our project managers will also help you identify other things that you may need along that 12-month course. For instance, we like to run workshops that can support a few projects together, looking at something such as learning design, or webinars to talk to someone about user testing and feedback cycles. The other thing to expect over and above the money is that we like you to, sorry, gone too far, but that we like to kind of manage the cohort actively. So we have a mandatory workshop as part of the kickoff process where all of the successful projects can meet each other and run 2-minute pitches. And we think that's a really important part of bringing the seed projects together. And we also ask that you engage, if you're successful, that you engage with our kind of overall promotion activity. So that includes, we'll write case studies and use imagery and details of the projects to promote what we're up to, and to promote the work of UFI more broadly, but also to promote your project and the things that you've achieved and developed. We don't keep IP. We ask that you keep IP because we believe that the best person to exploit what you're doing is you. But in return, we also ask that you do actually use it, because there's nothing more frustrating than funding a fantastic project and then it gets shelved. And we are exploring whether or not to introduce a sort of use it or lose it clause at some point. But at the moment, it's entirely left with the applicant. So what are the deadlines? What are the timescales? At the moment, the application process is not yet open, but it will open on the 24th of April. It stays open until the 25th of May. Then we reopen stage 2 on the 29th of June, and then the final decision is made by trustees in September 2017. And as I said, there is a mandatory kickoff workshop that will then take place. So where to find help with your application? You can join us on, as you have, on a webinar, or you can come along to one of our events. We've got 2 next week, one in Belfast and one in Manchester. We have FAQs and guidance on our website, and we try and broadcast everything through our Twitter and LinkedIn accounts. And if you register for our newsletter, we try and send out everything via that route as well. That includes links back to all the information you need on the website. If after all of that you still think you need some support, there's an email address which is info@ufi.co.uk, and you can always drop us an email there, and that goes to, well, that will go to someone who monitors it and bounce it out to the most appropriate member of the team to give you some support. So that is the end of the slides, which will be available, in fact, if they're not already, on the website. And I will come to the questions now. I'll start from the top, basically. Thank you, those of you who've introduced yourselves. It's really interesting for us, and hopefully you guys find it useful too. So the first question is, can you tell me what constitutes vocational learning? I can tell you what we class as vocational learning, which is a slightly, I realise that sounds like I'm being pedantic, but there are lots of different definitions, and the key one for in terms of this application is our definition, and that is we look for skills for work. So what we want are either skills that are specific to a sector, or skills that you can show are needed by a sector, even if they are generic skills, or the literacy and numeracy, or maths and English, I'm not sure what we're calling it at the moment, but the so skills that you need for the workplace. Feel free to come back round on that question if you think I haven't answered it in enough detail. Oh, I'm enjoying all the introductions. So I think I mentioned it already. Yes, you can have a copy of the presentation of the webinar. If you're struggling to find it on the website, drop us a line at info@, and we can email it to you separately. So the next question is, would we say that second language is a vocational skill for people dealing with non-English speakers? Theoretically, yes. It's a slightly grey area. It's not a slightly grey area. It's a perfectly black and white area. It can be a vocational skill. The thing that we have found in the past with applications is that people have not articulated properly why it's a vocational skill. And the thing with a second language is that if you need to show us a very specific industry need, otherwise your application will come across as learning language for pleasure or as a hobby, and then that will make it ineligible. And equally with picking up a second language, you would have to make it very clear why what you are proposing will have better learner outcomes or offer something different to those things that are already available. So the next question is, are we interested in entrepreneurial leadership skills? This is a tricky area. Again, it's a little similar to the previous question in that you would need to show us the industry need rather than a generic sort of these are nice to have sorts of skills. So you would need to show why having these skills is going to have a significant impact on the community of learners you're targeting, and what the route into them actually using them in the workplace is going to be. So the next question is, we say we don't deal with numeracy or literacy, but would a second language be included in that? I think I feel that I may have answered the second language bit, although I do want to be very clear here. We do fund numeracy and literacy. We very explicitly do fund numeracy and literacy projects. But if you feel like there's another question around the second language, feel free to come back round again. So the next question is, does vocational and pathway to work include entrepreneurism and pathways to social enterprise, social action project setup? That's a tricky question. I think that you would need to be talking about a very specific pathway rather than a generic, if this skill were available, more people would set up social enterprises. And I think you'd need, so the challenge there would be making it quite clear how there was a very definite route to employment or work through what you were proposing. Next question is, will the slides and recordings be made available after the event? Yes, if you're struggling to find them, drop an email to info@. Next question is around where the workshops take place. I did touch on it, but we've got one next week in Belfast and Manchester. The London one has already happened. So the next question is around content-only projects, and we've asked that I talk a little bit more about what we mean by content-only. What we mean by that is we don't fund projects, for instance, just to digitize or to digitize existing content. We don't fund projects where you're just videoing. You're just creating a very simple set of course materials for videoing lectures, for instance. What we are looking to fund are projects that represent a new way of doing something. If that is a project that requires a lot of content creation, that's fine. It is the ethos of the project that matters. What is going to be different about what you're proposing, and how is that going to have a better, greater impact than than the things that currently exist? So that's why we say we don't fund content-only projects, because if you're just looking at content, it is very difficult to show why what you're doing is any different to what currently exists and why it would have a different outcome. So the next question is, can the funding be used for software development? The simple answer is yes. If you want any more detail, drop me another question. So when we say literacy and numeracy skills, would you include foreign language skills, particularly where they're required for employment? I think I've probably covered most of that already, but the simple answer is we would include foreign language skills only where they are required for employment. We wouldn't cover foreign language skills as a thing that is good to have. You would need to make it very clear why you were proposing a project around a vocational need. The next question is, what's the success rate of stage 2 submissions which have progressed from stage 1? I am just going to slightly explore that question a second. Do you mean as in how many applications generally proceed from stage 1 to stage 2, and then of that stage 2, how many are successful? So that's the question I'm going to answer. If that's not the question you're asking, ask me again and we'll see if we can get to the bottom of it. The questions around success rates are always difficult to answer because we are a relatively new organisation in grant funding terms, and we are still learning about how to do things. Our aspiration is for there to be a high level of success, clearly. With the first round, we had just over 100 applications and 15 were successful. We probably took more through to stage 2 at that point than we should have done, because my hope is, the idea is that everything that we take through to stage 2 is we believe to be totally fundable, and then it's only when we explore the detail further that they unfortunately don't make it. So my aspiration is for there to be a very strong conversion rate between stage 2 and success. There isn't a set ratio we work to. So I'm struggling to answer the question with very specific details because the general figure given in grant funding circles is that you fund 1/3 of all applications that go through stage 2. So that's a sort of general grant funding figure. I don't know if that's any help. Sorry, come back to me if you want to challenge me more on that. So the next question is, we know you don't fund schools, but what about skills for teachers? Teaching as a vocation, we are open to projects that explore skills for teachers. We'd need to understand specifically what you're talking about, what the route to market is, why it's going to have an impact, why it's different. All of these are questions. One thing I should say, I probably should have said earlier, but I'm going to say now, is that when we talk about public benefit, we have 2 charitable objects. One is promotion of industry and commerce, and the other one is education of the public. When we talk about public benefit, it needs to be within one of those 2 areas. So even if the thing you are teaching people is a fundamentally good thing, that won't have an impact on whether it's public benefit or not. In terms of public benefit, it makes no difference to us whether you are teaching mechanics or how to deliver life-saving treatment. That neither they are both equally as have equally high levels of public benefit in our eyes. The next question is, do seed-funded projects generally progress to further stage funding? So we don't have a funding ladder, and we don't operate it on a kind of bounce from one to the other. We have a thing called Impact, which are bigger funded projects, and we also have a thing called Amplify, which is VocTech Impact and VocTech Amplify. VocTech Impact is up to £300,000 of funding, and VocTech Amplify is an invitation-only convertible loan or convertible grant type funding, so more commercial terms. Both of those, we have seen projects that have stepped out of seed and have been successful with both of those, but it's certainly not guaranteed, and it's not always the most appropriate route for seed projects either. So the next question is, you plan to go to market in September. Are you able to apply for funding to support phase 2 of our project? Obviously, that's not a huge amount of detail, but in very simple terms, yes, there's no reason why, if something's already happened on your project and you want charitable funding to make it happen bigger, faster, better, that's fine. Just need to make sure you explain it to us. So the next question is, does the funding cover staff time, e.g. lecturer hours? Now there's effectively two answers to this question. The broad principle is yes, the funding could cover staff time. You need to make it very clear why that time is specific to delivery of the project. The flip side of that is, I'm not sure why that would include lecturer hours particularly, unless it was to do with content creation, because what we don't do is we don't fund training, as in buying a training course for people or training people. So if your proposal is to train 100 people directly, then that would be ineligible. I hope that's answered your question, but if it hasn't, ask me again and I'll come back to it. So would workplace coping skills count as vocational skills? I am not sure. I think it would be, you would have to be very, very clear as to what the need that you were addressing was and why there was a demand for it and what your route to market was. I would, at the moment, I would be inclined to say no, but you may have further detail on that I don't know. So the next question is, regarding the scale of delivery in 12 months, how many users would you ideally have a project connect with? There isn't really an ideal number because we fund so many different kinds of technologies and kinds of projects. What we look for is that you have an appropriate amount of users attached to the testing cycle of your proposal, and then you have a reasonable amount of users in your kind of visionary, what's the potential for this? So we wouldn't expect you to be achieving large numbers of users during the 12 months, but we would expect you to have a vision for where, if the 12-month project goes well and then continues to do well for the next 3 years, at the end of that 3 years, we would expect there to be a high number, you to have ambition for a high number of users. So the next question, and it's up to you to show us what that number of users, what's a high number of users appropriate to your tech or your project. If you're looking at a free to access app that's quite light touch in terms of learning, then you're probably going to be need to be looking at a higher number of users than if you're doing a more intensive intervention that's focused on a particular industry sector. The next question is, does the Christian community count as an industry sector? I don't think you'd count. I don't think you'd count it as an industry. You'd probably count it as a community. If your route to market is through a particular community, then that's fine. It's showing us what the vocational skill is key. You may, you may be able to demonstrate the efficacy of your product by working with a specific community, and then the underpinning part of it being that actually, if this works for this community, then there's a potential for it to work even beyond the boundaries of that community. The next question is, you're a large company in AI and AR, but you have a small education team trying varied approaches in classroom and corporate training space. Would it be okay for you to apply to Seed Grant to try and approach in a vocational space? Yes, it would. You would need to show why you needed us to fund it, why you weren't doing it yourself. So that is it because it's a high element of risk? Is it because actually, is there some sort of underlying, you think it's a fundamentally good thing to be engaging with vocational tech, but actually it's not where you see your business model. So would you be using our funding to kind of allow you to operate in a space that isn't necessarily your prime market? All sorts of different answers to that question, but the principle, yes. The next question is, when are we doing a workshop in London? The unfortunate answer is we've already done a workshop in London, and we don't have any more scheduled. But the flip side of that is that we are also trying to work with other organisations to kind of piggyback on their events. So if you sign up to the newsletter, then hopefully we'll be able to keep you in touch with other places we're dropping into if you want to meet with the team, or feel free to drop us an email at info@, and we can let you know of any other scheduled events where we're going along with other people. The next question is, do you offer confidentiality until the project launches, where we feel that exposure prior to launch could risk the business? So yes, we do. Obviously, all throughout the application process, everybody involved has signed confidentiality agreements. So it's a completely confidential process applying. So we assign you with a project manager, and they will help you get to launch. We have in the past had a project where we've used a lot of code words about what the project's called. We haven't referred to it by name in order to keep the launch as clean as possible. So we are used to working with projects where being very circumspect about who and what you broadcast is important. What we do ask is that you provide us with a form of words that you're happy to say that what your project is about, but not the detail. I mean, obviously we need to know the detail in terms of project management, but in terms of what we're going to broadcast, we don't need the detail. The next question is, can you make an application without attending a workshop? Yes, is a very simple answer. You can. Can the funding be used for mobile app development? Yes. The next question is to revisit previous one. Oh, good. Sorry, I've just seen your other things at the bottom, Allied. Hopefully I have answered your question, so I won't revisit it unless you shout again. Can content-only projects be used for reaching a wider target market? Like putting content online from more geographical areas to access the content? Theoretically, yes, but you would need to show us why. You weren't just doing a build it and they will come project. So putting something online does not, as I'm sure you know, guarantee that just because it's there doesn't mean that people come and find it. So you would need to be showing us why you were putting something online and the measures you were going to take to make it available to people. Okay. Next question. How do you judge what a necessary skill for a certain sector is, and how specific can we be in targeting specific skills? i.e., do you have to target a broad range of skills, or can you target a small range of skills that are useful in a more limited range of contexts? So that's So I'll try and break that down. We look for you to tell us why what you are planning to target is a good thing. And so this is an open call across all industries, sectors, communities and technologies. And you therefore have to assume that the bulk of people reading your application are not going to have an intimate knowledge of the sector that you operate in or the technology you are proposing to use. So write the summary at the start of it, write it as if you were talking to a lay person. And that includes talking about the sector that you're proposing to target. What you need to show is why what you're doing is needed. Why is it going to make a difference? So that may be a set of specific skills that have been identified as critical for an industry sector, or a set of more generic skills that can be applied across lots of different people. We have a portfolio of projects that covers everything from very specific kind of. We've got a project that looks at food preparation in schools. We've got projects that look at using augmented reality on the manufacturing shop floor. We've projects that do numeracy without numbers. We've got the food preparation. So there's a wide variety within our project portfolio. We have NanoSymbox, which is using motion sensor technology to look at molecular interactions aimed at technician level skills and people who are for whom chemistry is a barrier for other courses at college. So the answer to your question is kind of, you tell us you can do both, but you need to show us why it's a good idea. The next question is, do we accept multiple separate applications from the same organisation? Yes, we do. There's a slight hitch here, which is that we are still wrestling with our system, and that means that you will have to create a new user account for each application that you submit in order to keep it a clean application. And the caveat I would always put on this is, if you are going to put in more than one application, make sure they are good. If there is any chance that you would be better off focusing all your efforts on one application, I would probably recommend you do that. However, that said, in the last seed round, there was one of the organisations had one successful application and one unsuccessful application, so it certainly won't stop each application is looked at in total isolation. The next question is, are there any costs to potential beneficiaries? The simple answer is, if you want there to be. We don't say that products have to be free to the user, but what we do say is you need to understand your target market. You need to understand how you're going to how what you're doing is going to be sustained beyond the life of the grant funding. And in many cases, that may be that there's a nominal fee being paid by the potential beneficiary, or it may be that you're looking at commercialising it outside the UK in order to make it free to the UK, or you may be talking about a period of time where it's subsidised for UK beneficiaries, or that you're cutting it via communities. You know, for instance, if you're a user still in college, then you get a discounted rate. There's all sorts of different ways of cutting it. I'm not sure if that's the question you're asking me, though. If it's not, feel free to re-ask it. So if there are constraints on funds available, do you part fund ideas to make funding go further, or is it an all or nothing approach? With Seed, with this fund, we have said that we will fund all those ideas that cross the line. So firstly, there's no benefit to putting in for less money if that's not what you need. We look at each project and whether or not it's asking for the fund, what it's asking for the funding to do, and whether that level of funding requested is appropriate. In either direction, is it too much or is it too little? So there isn't a pot that gets shared out between X number of projects, and if there are, if we slice them all in half, we'd fund more. So just apply for what you need to do the project. The next question is further for clarification regarding entrepreneurial skills. One of the ideas is that they address the needs of unemployed people, and they're people who can't fit into the current market. Okay, so I won't read the whole of your question unless you really want me to, but essentially from what you've just said, I think that those skills, you could make a good application, an eligible application. What you would need to do is be very articulate about so take what you've said in this question, but actually show how it's valued by business, and show how the route to market, as in the route to those people gaining those skills and actually being able to make a difference. What are the steps that need to happen, and how you think your idea will achieve that? The next question is, would the applications be considered if the training and upskilling of the learner is not accredited and would not contribute towards formal education? The simple answer is yes. We fund projects in both formal and informal learning, and we like to retain a mix of those. We strongly believe that it's essential that both parts of the system are addressed. The next question is, can you pay yourself and some staff with some of the funding? Well, the simple answer is yes. The more complicated answer is, but you have to show exactly why your time is being spent on the project. And as a charity, we also can't fund overhead, so we can only fund direct costs. So you'd need to show why they were direct costs, but fundamentally, yes. So the staff, coming back to the staff time, and the example would be if we have a lecturer with skills to develop VR content to release him for teaching and pay for those hours. What kind of links to the previous question? You need to show us that we are paying, that what you are paying for is a cost directly related to the project. If you are paying for his time, that person's time, to work specifically on the project, then that is an eligible cost. The next question is around whether seed funding makes a project ineligible for R&D tax credits. That is a question that's never come up before. Could I ask that you email it to info@ufi.co.uk, and we will look into it more specifically, get the answer back to you, but also make it part of our FAQs. Thank you. I don't think so, but let's. I'm not going to guess. Okay. So the next question is: recently set up a CIC specifically to support the project idea, and therefore do not have any prior year financial accounts. Do we fund startups? Yes, we do. So if you are successful, then you have to go through a period of due diligence, basically to check that you really do exist. If you are newly started, we have to take a different approach to it, but we are entirely open to supporting startups. The next question is, when you talk about project management, how hands-on do we like to be? Is it a supportive role or a driving role? So you are project managers of your own project. The project managers I talk about are our internal people, and it's very, very much a supportive role. So the idea is that we provide you with someone who will help you, but that you still have to run your own project. Oops. Sorry, I just accidentally went a bit far back in the system. Let me just get back to where we were. So do we expect your funding projects to make their own money or be living off grants? What we want for all of our projects is that they have a lifetime and sustainability beyond our funding. Now that may be through finding other sponsors, or it may be through a commercial funding, or it may be through a mixture of things. What we not particularly keen on are projects that effectively say, and after your funding's run out, we'll go and get more funding, and it will just carry on in perpetuity, because that's not a sustainability plan. that's just a kind of hand-to-mouth grant application process. However, we do, if for instance your idea is around delivering to a disadvantaged community, and that will be continued by maybe funding from a more community-based organisation, we understand that that's part of the portfolio of sustainability measures that you can put in place. So it's entirely dependent on the type of project that you are, and it's entirely dependent on the kind of thing we're trying to do. But what we need to be very sure of is that you understand what is going to happen at the other side of our funding. The next question is, will there be a recording of this webinar available? Yes, but if you want it very quickly, it's probably best off sending an email to info@. Will there be any costs to the successful applicants? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that, in that we pay for the, if you apply for a project, we will cover up to £50,000 all the costs associated with delivering, all the direct costs associated with delivering that project. We don't ask for any money from our applicants. We certainly don't expect you to pay for stuff for us. But equally, we'd be a bit surprised if ours was the only money in the organisation, because we would anticipate there being things that you would pay for that were associated with the activity that you are doing as an organisation. Does that make sense? The next question is, can you include salary in the 50K? So this comes back to the other question around, can you pay yourself and staff? You have to show us why the individuals whose salary you are proposing to pay are directly related to delivery of the project, and the portion of their time that we are paying for is specifically for the project. But as a fundamental principle about whether or not you can include staff costs, yes, you can. Next question, clear ideas about sustainability, but it's not expertise. Do you provide the support and advice, if successful, to look at growth and new market opportunities? We do, yes. We're not an accelerator or an incubator, but we do provide access to that sort of expertise as part of our package. If you've secured funding to kickstart the project, can the loan be included in our funding application? Yes, we don't look for match, but it's always helpful to understand where you have secured funding from to deliver what you're trying to do. Okay. At the moment, we have no more questions, so I'd like to say thank you to everybody for joining us, and thank you for engaging in the questions session. Oh, sorry. There's a couple more. How many grants can you apply for after the 12 months? I'm not sure what that question means. Basically, we want you to get to a finished project by the end of the 12 months with us. We don't operate a grant funding ladder. Essentially, what you do after the 12 months is kind of up to you. We just want you to have a plan to get somewhere. How many times can you apply for it? You can apply for it as many as you like. At the moment, we run it every April. We've toyed with the idea of opening it a second time, but at the moment we're such a small team that we just don't have the resource to be able to manage the process twice a year. So we would be looking to open it in April, and we do give feedback. What we do is, when we make the funding decisions, we email people and tell them they've been unsuccessful, and give them contact details for where they can ask feedback, and then we try and make it quite specific and bespoke. So rather than sending, everybody some generic feedback. We try and give people something useful so that if they do want to apply again, they understand why they weren't successful the first time. And thank you, everybody. Oh, sorry. After being successful and run your project for 12 months, can you apply again for the year after? I see. If you have had a successful project, that's great. There is zero chance of a successful project then applying for reaching a point where success would include applying for another seed grant. It may be moving on to something else or partnering up with another organisation or applying for somebody else's grant, but the seed grants are all about getting projects to a point where they are able to kind of demonstrate their efficacy and be on the road to having an impact. So you would have moved too far away from the stage at which you should be applying for a seed grant at that point. But you could apply for a VocTech seed grant for something else in something else. But so thank you to those of you who said thank you as well. I'm glad people have found it useful. As I said, drop us an email at info@ if you want to have any more detail or anything further. But thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you found it useful. So goodbye all. I'm going to shut down the session. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.